Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. I hope you all, or morning for some of us. My name is
Yeah.
Anthony Wooten, and I will be your host for this evening. I have had the immense pleasure of working directly under Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta, as well as Dr. Nikki Frazier. And I promise you, I'm not lying to you, I wouldn't do such a thing, that they have chosen some wonderful speakers and some wonderful panelists for you guys to witness tonight. So we have a very diverse background of people, and they come from diverse backgrounds and professions. So I think there's something here for all of us. I think we can all take something away from this evening. So I ask one thing of you. I don't want to make you work. I promise I will do no such thing. Just keep an open mind tonight. We're here to have fun, to relax, to learn something new, enjoy each other's company. And I know this is a different vehicle than we're used to, but as we have been doing, we're going to make it work tonight. So with all that being said, I want to inform all of you, if at any point you have any questions about any presenters or any speakers or anything like that, please feel free to type a question in our chat box. You can see it. For those of you that don't know, I know we're all familiar with Zoom, but for those of you that don't know, in the above, right here in the above right-hand corner, you can see a little chat icon. Just ask your questions. Don't worry, you won't be interrupting anyone. You won't be interrupting any speakers. We have someone who is handling all of our question concerns, a live correspondent who is making note of everyone's questions, and we'll make sure that we get to everyone's questions accordingly. Very quickly, I want to let you all know how tonight will be going. So first, we're going to start the night off with our inaugural address. We're then going to go into we will then go into our panel discussion, and then we'll go into our plenary session 1. Then we'll end the night off with our final remarks by Dr. Sengupta. And then lastly, please stick around because we have an awesome virtual tour. You will never see anything like this. I hadn't, and it's been led by someone who's really awesome. It's a surprise. I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to say it involves art. Okay, I'm not going to say anything else. All right, guys. So let's get right into the conference. I know all of our speakers are super excited and ready to go. I know we have no time to waste. So let's get into it. First, I want to dive into the inaugural address. I want to introduce you all to our wonderful Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta. A little background and context. Dr. Sengupta is the founder and director of Integrating Spirituality and Organizational Leadership Global Foundation. She is the founder of Integrating Spirituality and Organizational Leadership Foundation India specifically, which aims to integrate the wisdom drawn from different faith traditions into leadership styles to bring corporate prosperity and harmony into society. She created the Isol Research Foundation that promotes the indigenous model of management and entrepreneurship pertaining to human consciousness, mind, knowledge, and integral healing. She is the chief mentor and honorary governor of the Academy of Value-Based Management, registered in Canada. She has authored over 29 books, okay, which is highly impressive, and more than 4 dozen articles in national and international journals of repute. She's a widely traveled scholar and has lectured in various universities and business schools in different parts of the USA, Europe, and the UK. Dr. Singh Sengupta is a former Dean of Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, and currently she is a professor of organizational behavior, ethics, leadership, and COIL FIU. She's a partner of COIL FIU. She is the founding editor of 2 biannual international journals, one being International Journal on Spirituality and Organizational Leadership, and International Journal on Vedic Foundations of Management. Again, it is my immense honor to introduce to you Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta.
At the outset, I welcome each and all of you for this 2-day virtual conference on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID time. My honor and privilege to welcome all of you. We have with us our chairman, Dr. J.L. Raina, and Dr. Raina has been a great support to me. I am thankful to Dr. Nikki Frazier, with whom I worked on this conference, and here we are today. I'll make you walk through the background of the conference. Integrating spirituality and organizational leadership works on exploring sustainability through spirituality. Isol Foundation and Isol Global Foundation is a research-based management education initiative that draws insights from wisdom traditions to promote spirituality and harmony-based leadership to develop winning minds for gaining purpose-driven and principled managerial practices in organizations. Our website address is www.isol. Our inspiration is Trinity, the greatest spiritual leader of 18th century, Ramakrishna, who declared as many views, so many paths. Isol sources its inspiration from Swami Vivekananda, who was one of the first Indian to promote Indian spiritual values in the Western world. Isol draws inspiration from Ma Sharda on Women Leadership Award. The journey of integrating spirituality and organizational leadership started in 2002 as the outcome of the first international conference on business social partnership beyond philanthropy, which I organized when I was working at Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta during December 4 to 8, 2000. In 2007, we started a series of 5 conferences on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership every alternate year. We acknowledge the collaboration of School of Global Leadership and Entrepreneurship, Regent University, USA, to be our first conference partner in this journey. ISOL Foundation is registered as a charitable nonprofit organization on September 3, 2009, wide registration number 3717 under Indian Trusts Act Section 60. We did conferences after doing 4 conferences in India. The 5th was in 2015 at the Art Institute of Chicago, where we took ISOL Chicago Declaration. We launched ISOL Global Foundation, and then we released the 10 volumes on compendium on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership. These are our 2 journals, which Anthony just now introduced. These are 2 journals and the 10 volumes of the compendium on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership. ISOL Global Foundation is registered as 501c3 not-for-profit corporation under Iowa Non-Profit Corporation Act, effective from July 31st, 2015. ISOL Global Foundation is the international headquarters of ISOL Foundation. So ISOL Foundation India is the mother organization. In 2010, we formed ISOL Research Foundation, 2015 Global Foundation, an Academy of Value-Based Management started functioning in India in 2012. So under ISOL Research Foundation, we have 3 centers of excellence. One is Vedic Foundation of Indian Management, ISOL Center for Integral Healing, ISOL Center for Consciousness Studies. And within that, we bring out the journal, International Journal on Vedic Foundation of Management. Academy of Value-Based Management, we bring out a journal, International Journal on Spirituality and Organizational Leadership. In 2019, Academy of Value-Based Management got registered in Canada. In 2019, we created Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. This is the social responsibility wing of ISL Foundation, where we adopt villages and train the women to earn their livelihood. This Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship is targeted for empowering women in rural areas. We have ISL Global Foundation, which is registered in Fairfield. Now we have our presence in Toronto, Canada, and recently we opened a chapter in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. So the conferences ISL Global Foundation did since we got registered in 2015. So 2017, it was in Toronto, Canada. 2015, Chicago, USA, and 2019, Oxford. In 2018 conference, this is the launch of ISL Global University, which we did on September 11, 2018. This is what we are currently working on. We dreamt of an ISL Global University in USA with a campus in India. So the conference now, ISL 2020, integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID times. The recent outbreak of the deadly coronavirus compels humanity to focus and integrate love and compassion into the dealings with others and nature. When our way of life is at threat, we forget boundaries and competition and allow our actual spiritual values to lead. World as a global market, world as a global family. This is the paradigm shift. While collaborating on COIL program with Dr. Nikki Fraser, which is on global cities and transformation of boundaries, we integrated Vasudev Kutumbakam in a coronavirus environment. This was the first step in this direction, and then followed that we thought of doing this conference. So the challenges in front of us, the pandemic has posed several challenges before the organizations. The question arises, in virtual hybrid workforces, what leadership styles a manager should possess to move forward? Will increasing uncertainty and ambiguity will lead to new organizational forms? How to bring managers back to work? What will be the new normal structure and functioning? So, post COVID 19 and the change management, most significant change management, this digital transformation period, where leadership qualities become more critical in aligning the different stakeholders' minds to move ahead. Technology is just an aid, it's people who transform the workplace. A leader needs to have an entrepreneurial mindset, an entrepreneur and skills to navigate through uncertain times, believe in oneself, and passion and sincerity to achieve the goals helps in moving forward. When a heart responds to heart, then a static administration is transformed into a developmental administration. So, with these thoughts in mind, ISL Global Foundation, in collaboration with FIU, launched this integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID times. There are 10 different conference tracks, and few of them will have, we'll be listening today in the panel discussion. The world as a global market versus world as a family, global cities and the transformation of boundaries, integrating Vasudev Kutumbakam in a coronavirus environment, compassion and love-based leadership styles in the era of digital transformation, peace and harmony, connecting to local communities and society for sustainable development, human values-centric leadership styles to align people with the organization, feminine styles of leadership, meeting the challenges of post-COVID times, fearless entrepreneurial leadership to navigate post-COVID time, humanitarian supply chain management, integrating spirituality into financial decision making, and modern agile and the role of spirituality in digital transformation. Our esteemed speakers, Dr. Sandro Formica, keynote address, Dr. Connie Baker. I'm happy that Dr. Baker could make it because we started our journey where Dr. Connie Baker was the collaborator on behalf of Regent University, Dr. J.L. Reina, Chairman, Isol Foundation, Dr. Howard Frank, Professor at Florida International University, Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy, Dean of the University of Washington, Both Hill School of Business, Dr. Bhuvan Unhelkar, Professor at University of South Florida, Dr. Meredith Newman, Professor at Florida International University, Dr. B. Charumati, who is currently head of the department and professor at Management Department at Pondicherry University. Dr. Agatha Caraballo, professor at Florida International University, Dr. Stephanie Dossier, director at Florida International University, Dr. Anurag Agarwal, professor at Florida Gulf Coast University, Ms. Jillian Arenado, program director at Florida International University, Mr. Andy Lehman, chairman of the board for All Point POS, Ms. Brittany, Dr. Sarah Hurst, professor at SUNY Empire State College, Dr. Anand Saxena, associate professor, Deen Dayal Upadhyay College, University of Delhi, Mr. Anthony Wooten, student at Florida International University, Ms. Avana Murray, student at Florida International University, and Dr. Emmy Galpin, chief curator at Florida International University. So with this, I once again welcome each and all of you and looking forward to the different deliberations which we have scheduled in these 2 days international conference. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh Sengupta. That was wonderful. And again, thank you so much for the work that you've done and for allowing us all to be here. Thank you so much. And within that work, I want to go ahead and also introduce your co-chair, the awesome Dr. Nikki Frazier. A little background on Dr. Nikki Frazier. I have known her personally, as I mentioned, and she is wonderful. She is my professional mentor. And personal note, she is just, there's no one like her. But Dr. Frazier is a proud graduate of FIU's BPA and MPA programs. She is an assistant teaching professor in public policy and administration at Florida International University and the faculty advisor for Pi Alpha Alpha, the International Public Policy and Administration Honor Society, and the service organization. And she's a part of a service organization, Students Feeding Miami, FIU. Dr. Frazier has deep roots in the Miami-Dade County community, bringing many years of hiring, recruiting, leading, and coaching professionals and students. Dr. Frazier mentors many BPA, MPA students to successful academic and public service careers. Again, I formally introduce you and welcome Dr. Nikki Frazier.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and namaste to all our partners in India and other parts of the United States. It has been my distinct honor and pleasure and opportunity as a lifelong learner to learn so much from Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta and from her students as well. When we got together in March, thanks to Jillian Avenado and Dr. Stephanie Dossier, little did we know 8-9 months down the road, we would be co-chairing a conference, writing a grant, writing a book together, and mentoring students. Wow, who would have thought all those connections, collaborations, and relationships would have come out of our meeting in March, Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. Imagine that. So thank you so much. But really, instead of a presentation, I want to present all the different collaborators that we have here tonight. In particular, my talented students and the talented students that Dr. Singh Sengupta has mentored as well, her PhD and master students. We had 18 students work brilliantly across time and space. Time meaning we were 10 and a half hours away from each other, and about 8,500 miles as well. But our talented students made it work. And so they talked about their global perspective, and they engaged globally using different mediums. They created videos together, they created presentations, they wrote papers, and some of my talented students, you will see present some of the research that we gathered together as a research team. So thank you so much again. Thank you, our collaborators, the Frost Museum at FIU, Cyber, the School of Business, Global Learning, COIL, Dr. Meredith Newman from FIU and from the American Society for Public Administration, my best friend and mentor, Dr. Agatha Caraballo, as well, former president of ASPA and technology professor at FIU. Another one of my mentors who you'll hear shortly is Dr. Howard Frank, the chair of our public policy and administration department, and also the director of the FIU Metropolitan Research Center. So again, thank you so much, our collaborators. We love you, and in the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we are a global family. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. I also want to make a quick mention. If any of us need any restroom breaks or anything like that, we're going to have 5-minute little intervals between sections between the conference. So don't worry. On to our next speaker. Sorry, our next speaker is Dr. J.L. Reina. Sorry, if I could maybe get my thoughts together. Sorry. Dr. J.L. Reina is a chemical engineer from Jodhpur University and has with him a rich experience of over 40 years in the petroleum industry at top management level. He served as the Secretary General and CEO to Petrotech Society. Prior to joining Petrotech, Dr. J.L. Reina was Provost Chancellor of the University of Petroleum and Energy Studies of Dehradun. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. He has been a recipient of several awards from industry and other associations, and currently he is a chairman of the Isol Foundation. I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Dr. J.L. Reina.
Namaste to all. I think that is the post-COVID area situation where Indian way of greeting people has become handy. So although I would say namaste to all, yet I can say good evening to our American friends. I have, as has been told by Mr. Weston, I am an industry man. So my sort of exposure to spirituality has been almost like a job on hand, hands-on job, I would say, because in dealing with people throughout that industrial career, I think spirituality comes in very handy in terms of at least dealing with most of the people. I have personally defined, it is my definition, not a universal definition of spirituality, talking to self and almost evaluating yourself every day in terms of what your dealings have been throughout the day and whether your mind is satisfied with whatever dealings one has done. So ISOL has really been a pursuit. Dr. Sunita Singh has elaborated our journey, and I have been now associated uh, almost throughout its lifespan uh, with ISOL, uh, and I feel that this is the only way in dealing with people uh, post-COVID situation. Management, though, has been a constant evaluating, uh, rather evolutionary process, because the management styles have changed right from time when it was almost a master-slave relationship in terms of work styles um, in organizations. It has changed totally in terms of now dealings with people. You can't take things for granted whenever any situation needing uh, human involvement. There are problems, but at the same time, one should say that without human involvement, nothing, although it is a machine area now, everything is almost automated, but human integration with or human involvement in day-to-day dealings can never be avoided. So therefore, there is a constant need, I feel, of at least devising a system which can really reflect the true managing style of, those who are managing people and those who are getting managed. Uh, it may be vary from organization to organization, but never mind the size of the organization uh, does matter. In household, you may follow one style, whereas dealing outside, you may have to change your style of working. But at the same time, even in household now, I think democratic way of dealing with people has come into stay. You can't take even a child for granted because he is now also online and he cannot get disturbed on the online system. So therefore, there is a need. I think next 2 days, Sunita has described the tracks, what are there supposed to be discussed. Next 2 days, we will get an exposure of dealing with people in post-COVID area. Post-COVID area, some of the situations have now almost come to stay. That means work from home, except for probably those organizations where productivity is hand productivity or involvement of human labor is involved. Otherwise, online system has become a reality, and that has to be accepted by management gurus. Second point probably would be that how to elicit opinions of people so that these styles which a person is following will get changed or get sort of altered in terms of this thing. That personal feeling or that information from people has got to be really assimilated, and that has got to come into force. I would say that it has been rightly sort of planned to have this 2-day virtual conference, which will give us quite a good exposure in terms of understanding the post-COVID situation area. I feel humbled to be here with you people, although it is quite early morning for India, but nevertheless, Indians by tradition have been early risers, and maybe it is a personal sort of welcome to all of you early morning to be with us for this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. J.L. Reina. We're going to go to our next speaker now. I want to introduce him. He is Dr. Howard Frank. So Dr. Howard Frank, he is chair of FIU's Public Policy and Administration Department. He's written extensively in the areas of local government budgeting, budgetary forecasting, and performance measurement. As the director of FIU's Metropolitan Center, Dr. Frank has carried out funded research examining the privatization and efficiency program of the Miami-Dade County Housing Agency. He has also carried out research dealing with the South Florida workforce and has served on Miami-Dade County's Efficiency and Competition Commission and has served on the Oversight Board for the Miami-Dade Housing Agency Section 8 program. His current research interests focus on public sector retirement behavior and local government performance measurement. Again, I introduce to you all Dr. Howard Frank.
Thank you. That introduction almost makes me feel, ancient and whatever. But thank you very much, my dear student colleague. Thanks again. Yes, I'm Howard Frank, and I'm chair of the Department of Public Policy Administration here at FIU. And I'll begin somewhat anecdotally. Because yes, I've been a member of the faculty since 1988, which is almost hard for me to believe. And during that time, when I started, FIU had approximately 17,000 students. And right now it has approximately 60,000 students. Now, I got to FIU just shortly after it admitted freshmen and sophomores. And it had almost no graduate education. So now I fast forward and I'm employed at a university that has over 200 degree programs, a law school, a medical college, and it ranks in the top 100 public research universities. And our department alone has 4,000 alumni, and many of them are leaders throughout South Florida in government and the nonprofit sector and beyond. Now, let me continue my anecdote a bit. If you are an employee at FIU, you know that there is one extraordinarily important building on campus. And it isn't necessarily the library, it is an air traffic control tower. Because FIU was, when it admitted its first students in 1972, was built on an abandoned World War II airfield. And indeed, the air traffic control tower is almost the spiritual hub of the university. I recall that is where I bought my first parking decal, and the building is preserved today as a reminder that we started on an abandoned airfield. And I wanted to use that anecdote as a theme, speaking to the theme of the conference, the integration of spirituality and leadership. And I would argue that building a university on an abandoned airfield is clearly an act of faith. And it was also at the time a reminder that long-range planning that recognize the value added of education and its utility in building communities. Prior to FIU being in Miami, if you wanted to earn an affordable four-year degree, you had to go hundreds of miles north and go to Gainesville or Tallahassee. And it's important to note that when FIU opened, it really opened horizons of learning for higher education in a major metropolitan area that really lacked that essential ingredient for personal growth. So I continue that by saying the metamorphosis of an abandoned airfield and turning that into a university speaks to a theme that I believe is common to both the public and private sectors. And I'm indebted to Nikki Frazier for being a good sounding board on this last night, because whether we speak of environmental, social, and governance in the private sector, or sustainability in or resilience in the public, an essential theme is interperiod or intergenerational equity. Those who consume in the present should be paying the true cost of their behavior, and they should be leaving succeeding generations with the resources to build their own legacy. And FIU's motto, hope, knowledge, and opportunity, speaks to a belief that investments in human capital reap significant future benefits for graduates and society. Our essence as educators at FIU and elsewhere speaks to our social commitment of finances and human resources to build our community and our society through investments in finances and the sweat equity of faculty, students, and staff. COVID-19, from my vantage, is a really serious challenge to the precept of interperiod equity. The pandemic has consumed enormous resources under the collective heading of survival. In the US, state and local governments have strained to maintain current services against a backdrop of revenue shortfalls. The federal government is incurring enormous debt to expand unemployment benefits and develop vaccines. And these are absolutely necessary to maintain the basic needs of household and provide the medical tools for conquering COVID, but they are going to foist enormous burdens on future generations who are going to have to pay for those expenditures. In the private sector, COVID has fostered, what I remember from my undergraduate days, Joseph Schumpeter's creative destruction. In some sectors, such as retail and hospitality, they're going to be devastated. On the other hand, companies that are devoted to work from home and online are booming. Many companies are going to fall victim to the pandemic, and their employees will need to retool for future employment. Resilience and sustainability will take on a new meaning in what is likely to be a different economy from that of February 2020. We can only hope that leaders in all sectors will have the wisdom and, the spirituality to think like the founders of FIU. Somehow they will have to build a foundation for a very different future. That foundation may be costly, but they will have to do so with an eye to equity and fairness. In America, the pandemic has exposed and exacerbated longstanding social inequities. Our leadership will need to address those inequities. Prior generations rose to the occasion in dealing with crisis and rebirth. From my family history, my father went to college under the GI Bill after World War II, which provided for millions of veterans to attend college. And that was an amazing investment in the future of our country. As COVID ends, decision makers in all sectors are going to have to think long-term and intergenerationally and ask about their legacy to successive generations at a time when meeting current demands is extraordinarily difficult. This conference is predicated on a core assumption that leaders will meet current needs while building a foundation for a more equitable, inclusive, and yes, resilient future. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy and learn from your interchange of ideas at the conference.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frank. Also, very quickly, I know you said you felt ancient. Who doesn't love good antique? Because I sure love a good thrift store antique. So don't don't worry. But thank you so much. That will wrap up our inaugural address. We are going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So everyone, if you like to do what you have to do, we'll return in 5 minutes and we'll get started, and we will have our keynote speaker come up next. So we're going to start that 5-minute break starting now. Alrighty, everyone. That is going to wrap up our break. All right. So I have the awesome honor of introducing Dr. Sandro Formica. A little info on Dr. Formica. He is maybe I don't know the info. He's a teacher of managing self and others and positive organizations at Florida International University. Also, he teaches the economics of happiness, very interesting, in selected European universities as well. Sandro's book, Personal Empowerment, Empower the Leader Within You, is highly experiential and contains over 200 self-awareness practices and exercises. In August 2019, Forbes magazine, Italy, labeled Sandro as the happiness scientist. I think we all can use a little bit of that. Sandro is the academic director of the Chief Happiness Officer, granted by WOHASU and Florida International University Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Sandro Formica.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. First of all, greetings from Italy. It is 1:20 a.m. in Italy, so it was wonderful to sleep a couple of hours, and I'm back here. So please forgive me if I might not function at 100%, but it's a wonderful experience so far. I've been enjoying the introductory speeches, and what I'm going to share with you is simply a framework that I have developed through the years. And I would like at this point to share my screen. I trust it's working right now. So you can hear me clearly, right? Is it good? Fabulous. Okay. So you see, you obviously emphasize organizational leadership, and I would like to start from self-leadership, because for some reason, what I have discovered by starting to go to high schools, both in Italy and in the US, and I met with over 6,000 students, and I found out that from first grade to 12th grade, they have studied over 20,000 hours, considering about 10-15 minutes of homework every day. And of these 20,000 hours, they haven't studied 1 hour themselves. And I found it very, very interesting. And I said, oh, how fascinating it is that we put so much emphasis on what happens outside of us, that really we do not spend much time on studying what is happening inside of us. So now I will bring up some research, but not focusing on that, but just to show you that self-awareness, self-leadership, it's so instrumental to really function in a way that is fully satisfactory in the world. So this is just an example of how Harvard Business Review, which is probably one of the leading magazines when it comes to leadership, talks about the self. You see, as you know, to improve your team, you got to work on yourself. You better know yourself, and this will help your resiliency, and it pays to be yourself, etc. So there is so much out there that emphasizes the importance of the self. Unfortunately, again, we were not prepared to do so. And I found it fascinating that the two most popular courses in the history of both Harvard and Yale are courses on happiness. Students said, well, probably, professor, it is because they are the easiest courses. They get an easy A, but no, it's not that way, unfortunately. So, here is just in 2018, 7 articles of the Harvard Business Review talk about self-awareness again. So we see that this is a theme that is coming back over and over and over again. And sure enough, it says something about the system, and maybe it suggests that we need to make a change. So when I started doing the work on self-awareness on myself, my own experience, I noticed, and again, I started 27 years ago, I really found out that I was a different me, completely different. And in fact, I went from here, if you will Google me, it would show anything related to hospitality and tourism. And that's what I was an expert of. I got my green card for my exceptional ability to publish in peer-reviewed journals in hospitality and tourism. However, I discovered that was not exactly who I truly was. And when I started making the change, I went from here, to having Forbes, Italy, in this case, to call me the scientist of happiness. For some reason, there was a shift. And in fact, if you Google me now, I have a totally different profile. And I tell you, Google is not that quick at changing someone's positioning, that's for sure. So something changed, and I want to take you through the process, because then I started adding new courses, both in the US at FIU as well as Europe, on disciplines and fields that almost didn't exist in the past. And this is my framework, a framework that I have been testing at FIU over the last 10 years. I started my first course at FIU working on the self in 2011. And really what I noticed that was working with me, and then I saw that was fully backed by science individually, was really working on these elements of the self, starting from needs, values, talents, and skills, all the way to developing a life plan. And what I found is that in many cases, there were over 100 of academic articles in each one of these fields or competencies or skills or disciplines that were not really integrated within the formal higher education. But not only higher education, actually, middle school and high school, they were not there. They were missing. However, as we have seen in the Harvard Business Review, are extremely essential to your own development. So now there is one element, and forgive me here for leaving is a subtitle in Italian, but there is one element that is essential to doing this work, which is vulnerability. And in fact, it's not a coincidence that one of the most popular, actually is the third most popular TED Talk of all times, is called The Power of Vulnerability by Brené Brown. And this shows, and again, here I'm bringing Harvard Business Review, that really witnesses that, and for sure, now we are talking about post-COVID, again, here it shows that today's leaders need vulnerability, not bravado, and this is very, very recent from a couple of months ago. And it brings up the issue of, okay, if we put a mask, if we put a protection, nothing is going to go through either, inside out or outside in. And we need to learn that what was considered a weakness in the past is actually a strength. But it's not easy. I could tell it's absolutely not easy to do, but it's essential though, if we want really to grow and develop and reach, self-realization, if you want, in Maslow's terms. So just to give you an idea, I'll give you 2-3 snippets here of what I went through in order to really start digging deeper and become more and more self-mastered. So I really needed to develop self-leadership to move forward, to create my team. And first of all, I started asking myself, what are your needs at home? Are they fully met? And what I found was that no, I were not fully met. Not even the needs for safety and protection were met, as a matter of fact. In fact, I couldn't talk about certain issues, so I didn't feel safe. Now, you think that this is just at home, but in reality, at work, I found out by being the academic director of the Chief Happiness Officer program with the FIU and the World Happiness Summit, which is the biggest event on happiness worldwide, is that at work, one of the basic, the most important needs is the need for recognition, and in most cases is not supported. So far, I got 1/3 of fulfillment of satisfaction of that need, whereas 2/3 are not there. And so people, when they go to work and they feel that they are not supported, that they are, they are not seen, what happens is that they go on survival. And when you have a survival mechanism, of course, you can be creative. You are really becoming a bit selfish because you need to protect yourself from maybe someone who is a coworker is envious of you, or the boss who is not supporting you. So, these are basic principles that I always understood intellectually, but really when I started working on them experientially was a whole different world. And so then obviously it's also important to find out who did we choose to meet our needs, because very often, as we are social beings, somehow we choose someone to meet our needs, and maybe this person doesn't even know in the first place. So then I started sharing with them, I didn't realize, but really I chose you to satisfy my need for growth, my need for play. Are you willing to do that? And really that affected myself and my growth deeply. Now we can look at values, and I found a lot of connection between values and self-leadership and happiness as well, and performance at work and satisfaction with life and company performance. So you see, for example, values, I started asking myself, what are your values? And truly, it was amazing that for 30 years, I really didn't know. And once I found them, then I asked myself, well, in these cases, I'm asking you, what is the specific value that brought you here? Why are you here? Because if we don't find anything, something important, certainly we don't engage. And the other very critical issue is, am I living my values with my behavior? And again, there too, I found that I was not fully living my values. As a matter of fact, I was engaging in a number of activities that I said I would tell others, I have to do this, I have to do that. And when you have to do something, it means that you are not living your values. Otherwise, you would say, I want to do this and that. As a matter of fact, I'm here because I want to, and I woke up in the middle of the night because I want to. And so this is very important to me. And I encourage everybody to ask yourself, when you say you have to, why don't you challenge yourself and ask yourself if you, in fact, you're living your values? And do you know the values of the people close to you? And what I found using a very easy exercise is that when you guess the top 3 values of someone who is near and dear to you, there is a high possibility, a chance that you are not able to guess those values. And what I found incredible, especially with parents and child, is that the child generally is pretty good at guessing the three values of the parents, but the parents are not really good at guessing the three values of the child. Very often parents, want to pass on their values to their children, and they are not really listening carefully to their values. And it's incredible that we are in a society where even though we spend a lifetime with someone, we might not know the values of the other person. So I encourage you to do that, to write down your three values and guess the three values of the other person. And then you exchange information and see what happens. And I tell you, it's really life-changing, just this simple exercise. Let's move on. Now we go almost toward the end of the process of what I call self-science and imagination. I found hundreds and hundreds of academic articles that are talking about imagination, especially in sports and in medicine. And I found it to be extremely powerful. I mean, if you go online, you can check, the work of Ellen Langer, which is the lead psychologist at Harvard, and she has tons of experiments on imagination, and shows how much the mental imagery can really make a difference in the body. And it's incredibly important, because to me, it's one of the biggest levers, or the biggest untapped potentials of human beings. So how do you use it? And I found out also that we mostly use it to actually create future images of events that have not occurred, that go against us because we worry. So when we worry, we think about an event, a future event we don't want. And isn't that funny that we actually use such a powerful tool to actually create a future we don't want? And of course, do you activate your five senses while imagining, which is a very, very important and useful tool to do that. And practice being your future self. And this is extremely important. And you will see that there is also, there are publications by Harvard Business Review that talk about that you need to practice being your future self if you want somehow to anticipate what is coming in the future. So now, and life purpose, I can't tell you how many are the advantages of life purpose. And in fact, research says that we live up to 7 years longer. There are fewer instances of getting Alzheimer or cardiovascular diseases. We are happier, we make more money, we divorce less. So it's very, very powerful. And so I wonder if we can think about the legacy we intend to leave, and if we can help students do the same, and neighbors do the same. What is that brings meaning to your life? And what's your life purpose? And are you in alignment with your purpose at work or at home in general? I experienced a total lockdown with sealed windows and concrete restoration of the building. So jackhammering, basically all day. And I truly believe that purpose kept me sane. Not only kept me sane, but helped me build a better future. And in fact, during those months, a lot of new projects developed. And actually, myself and my team offered 400 hours of one-on-one self-empowerment contact with people in distress. So now I want to briefly switch from the self-leadership to the organizational leadership. And since I'm here right now in Italy, I want to bring you the case of a company that is an accounting company. And it's fascinating, this story, and probably you will, you will be fascinated as well. This company is up in northern Italy, as you can see, at the border with the eastern part of Europe. And about 10 years ago, they had 60 employees, and they said the gossiping was so bad that they decided either they were selling the company or they were going to change it. And they decided to change it in a way that was very interesting. They became one of the first positive organizations, which means organizations that added wellness and happiness in their processes. So what happened was that the boss, the owner of the company, started implementing all these steps that are actually part of self-science, and we didn't know each other. But it was fascinating when 2 years ago we met. I mean, we exchanged notes and we were really talking the same language. And they went through a process that never stopped, that covered all those steps. And I'll tell you the results, of course, of this company as we go along. So this is work on, obviously, Maslow hierarchy of scale and of needs. And this is love and belonging. So don't worry if there are some words you don't understand. I'll make sure I'll translate them for you. So this is a program that never stopped. And in fact, now they are at love and belonging after 11 years of work. And then this is the belonging part, that this is actually attached to a wall. And it's amazing when you go to their company, how much they made the intangible tangible in a way that all employees could be exposed to this. Look at the offices. The offices actually have on the walls, and of course the walls are here are made by glass, the values. They represent the values of the teams that work in these offices. For example, the values of this team is excellence. So they really want to focus on excellence, and this team is expert on excellence, and they build those programs, those training programs for everybody related to excellence. This is the group of vision. Again, the same thing. This is the entrance door. Think about it. Now they have 265 employees that had to go through the door at least twice when they enter every day and when they exit. And these are the values that were determined by the employees. And as you can see, I'll try to translate for you, are love, innovation, transparency, joy, spark, excellence, energy, gratitude, enthusiasm, beauty, creativity, vision, passion, etc. Let's move on. And this again is on the wall where everybody has to walk through. Love plus truth plus beauty equals happiness. So there is this constant, there are all these signs that keep the employees engaged from this point of view. Now let's switch to imagination. Their symbol, and they have a pin they all carry with them, is a flying fish. And the purpose of this is really to say, hey, we need to step out of the box constantly if we want to work together. That's essential. Otherwise, you can't work here. The purpose here is just to make the impossible inevitable, as it was, by the way, you have seen it at FIU, making the impossible inevitable. And that's very, very important. So for them, they carry this pin with them, and it's a constant reminder of the fact that they have to imagine themselves in a different environment and a challenging environment where they can win in a way. And you can see it here. I mean, these are all accountants here. And look, creative energy, they actually develop a bunch of talents, and actually they perform at their regional theater, which is quite a well-known theater. So again, these are accountants, and this is again fixed on the wall. So my point to you as I'm closing right now is that they changed deeply their performance. And I'll tell you clearly, this is the owner, and these are all the posts that you can see on the wall, and they are all about the future. They are all about rethinking the future and creating the future together. Now, just to give you an idea, since they started this activity, they have grown to double digit every year. Every single year, they have grown double digit based on the profit of the year before. They reinvest 35% on their employees of all their profits. And it's just incredible how powerful this is. It's not easy, they said, by any means. This has been one of the most challenging things. And I'll tell you one thing. Out of the 60 employees they started with, when they told them, we are going to do this work, we are going to do the work on needs and values, so you got to be vulnerable for us to continue this work. You know what? They lost 50% of their employees. 50% of their employees left the company willingly. They said, I can't do this. I just don't feel comfortable working on myself. Even if it's, the common good, it's not going to happen. And so they left. They were with 30 employees. And again, they are accountants. So they really needed them. And now they are 265 of them. And they have grown double digit. So that's the result. As a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, it was recognized by the most important newspaper of Italy as the top company in terms of transforming the company from a traditional organization into a positive organization. And I started with HBR and I closed with HBR. And imagination again here is critical. Take ownership of your future self, and especially you need to practice being your future self. So with this, I close my keynote speech, and I really thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Formica. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I know some of the things you said were highly inspirational for me myself, and I feel like we all can take something away from that, or at least ask ourselves some of the questions that you pegged. This weekend we have some homework to do. So thank you so much. That was amazing. I want to now take us into our first discussion panel. This will be moderated by Dr. Nikki Frazier. So Dr. Nikki Frazier, you can go ahead.
I think Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta would like to say a couple of words to our keynote speaker, Dr. Formica.
Yeah. This is Sunita Singh Sengupta. And I'm sure Dr. J.L. Raina joins me in thanking Dr. Sandro Formica for his wonderful presentation. I would like to mention that in India, we have not many scriptures on self-science. And at Isol Foundation, we do work on self at the core of this, and how that self gets manifested in work. So your presentation was amazing, simply brilliant, and we connected a lot with that. We strongly believe that internal excellence leads to external excellence. So we are very thankful in being connected to you, Dr. Sandra Formica, and we will be in touch with you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I
Thank
want
you so
to,
much.
I
Go ahead,
want to
Dr.
compliment,
Yeah, please, Dr. Raina would like to say a few.
I would like to compliment Dr. Parmika for really expressing my views, because my core of service period has been uh, self-evaluation all the time. And self-evaluation, unless you do that, you cannot interact with people on a level plan basis. So I must again compliment you. You have really spoken my words, and I thank you for this.
Thank you, Dr. Formica. I believe that you have so many of us who now want to take some of your courses, and we're glad that you're an FIU professor. We're going to be looking for you. So thank you very much, Arrivederci. Thank you so much. We appreciate your loss of sleep. So thank you very much. All right, so now it is my pleasure to introduce panel discussion number 1, integrating spirituality into business and society. I'm very proud of the next presenters. They are 2 of my interns, 2 of my collaborators in research in COIL. Ms. Brittany Broxton and Mr. Anthony Wooten will be presenting on the world as a global market versus the world as a global family. Give me 1 minute. Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Awesome. You can go ahead and start it. Alrighty. Thank you guys. So are you going to do the full presentation mode, or are you going to do?
It's saying it's in, there it is.
Oh, there it is. Awesome. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Dr. Frazier. It has been an immense honor and pleasure working under you, and I'm extremely honored and proud to be presenting this research that we have all put so much work into our team. So hello, everyone. I know some of you may be sick of hearing my voice, but here we go. I want to do a little bit of a background as to what led us to this research. Pretty much us right now in this moment is what led us to this research, because we asked ourselves in the team, we thought to ourselves, we came together because we thought COVID has been extremely full of loss, and it's been a commonality among a lot of us. Loss is something that we share. Loss of, unfortunately, lives, quality of lives, the way of life, health, jobs. There's loss in every direction, in every corner around the globe right now. And amongst that, you usually see people with loss ending up in very negative aspects and negative places within their own life. But we saw, and we have seen around the world, unity. We've seen people coming together and supporting one another, like today, finding ways to be able to be there for one another. And that is exactly why we chose to do this research. We wanted to know if there was a way that we can implement this strategy and this methodology into society post-COVID. What if we just live life like this? So that leads us to specifically integrate the concept of the global market versus the global family. We're going to go ahead and do some pros and cons of both of those themes. And we're going to explore how different organizations embody those concepts. So we're doing this specifically within the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're also doing this under the umbrella of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So as you see right now, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means, in simplest terms, one world, one family. And although it's 4 words, it, as we have found out, has come with a lot of complexities as we see it being applied to different societies. It seems simple on first sight, but as we see, it's very dynamic. So let's go ahead. You can go to the next slide. We're going to go ahead and compare the difference between the what we mean by a global family versus a global marketplace. So with the global marketplace, we're seeing some umbrella themes. We're seeing a lot of commercialism. We're seeing individualism. We're seeing a machine-like quality of life. We're seeing people putting economy and productivity over the value of human life. And there is a quantitative value place. There's a time and a place for anyone to be anywhere. And we're seeing that over people's quality of lives. We see this familial theme with hints of, well, not hints, direct themes of compassion, of collectivism, collaboration, a sense of sacrifice in the way that there is a greater good. People are thinking outside of themselves to be able to support one another. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. The first organization, because we want to use organizations to represent these different concepts applied in society. The first organization we looked at was World Central Kitchen. So this was started by Chef Jose Andres. He is the founder of World Central Kitchen. And within its span, starting over 10 years ago, it has fed over 25 million people. And just like that four-word simple definition of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, of one world, one family, Jose Andres had a theme that he started his business with as well. 4 words: world free of hunger. So we're seeing this simplicity, but yet there's so much complexity that comes along with these definitions. The way Jose Andres has done this, and especially in a COVID-19 environment, is he managed to feed 10 million people by unifying the globe. This is a global impact this man has made by going to different countries, including Haiti, Spain, the Dominican Republic, parts of West Africa. He decided, I'm going to make a unifying impact by reaching out, networking, and doing everything I can and using my resources. We see this familial concept because it takes that collectivism. It takes that thinking outside of yourself. It takes that greater good concept to be able to do that. So one thing about this is that he has also, in the US alone, has raised over $90 million for independent restaurants and different organizations. I want to make mention of this because as I mentioned with the marketplace, there is a quantitative value. The issue that we realize in our research that many people are facing with the thought of applying a familial concept to life is that there's this notion of you can't have a productive society if you don't focus on economy. We see now that you can raise millions of dollars, you can thrive globally, you can have a major impact, you can still be making money and still be putting humans first with this. So that is why I really wanted to emphasize that with Chef Jose Andres. Some of the pros of this ideology and methodology would be, one, Chef Jose Andres in the World Central Kitchen have fed over 20 million people. Pretty simple. You feed hungry people. That is amazing within itself. Don't need to explain that. It spreads resources. As Dr. Frank earlier mentioned, sustainability is a major part of what can help a globe and what can help societies and economies and in different parts around the world. And Chef Jose Andres not only implemented food and gave people food, he implemented strategies so that these villages and companies with minimal resources had the tools to sustain themselves and grow their own food once he left. This was a global impact that will last for years. One of the cons is that it has, anytime as we have found, as we've researched, anytime you have a major theme like familial connectivity and unity, you're going to have some backlash. We have a machine-like society. So you say, what if we scratch that and put humans first? People are not going to take too well to that. And in a lot of societies, a lot of corporations are going to take very well to that as well, because if you put economy over people, you get more money from those economies, as we found. So it has a major backlash within societies who already have that marketplace concept. So when we explore the marketplace, we look at companies like VF Corporations, who has decided to put the economy and globalization, commercialization over human lives. And I will give it to Brittany to explain that for you all.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much, Anthony. And like he said, for the example of the global marketplace mindset, we did choose VF Corporations based on a recent event that happened during the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Initially founded in Pennsylvania by John Barbie in 1899, VF Corporations began as the Reading Glove and Mitten Company. It now currently owns more than 20 global brands. VF accumulated a $10.5 billion fiscal revenue and employed over 75,000 people in 2020. Because they employ so many people worldwide, their decisions can have a massive effect on multiple communities. For example, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Bangladesh, one of VF's largest manufacturing sites, closed 58% of their entire country's factories, and 72.1% of the buyers and investors refused to pay for the labor costs or the finished products. So continuing with that recent event that we base this off of, on April 1st, 2020, VF corporations and other companies committed to pay for all production, and anything that was completed. However, in May of 2020, many factory sites in manufacturing countries such as Bangladesh, they received an email saying, "Do not ship the goods," sent by countless retailers such as VF corporations, PVH Corp, Levi's, and Target. As a result, $2.4 billion worth of products ordered were canceled, workers were left without compensation, and finished products were left with no buyers. When questioned by Vogue Business, VF had no satisfactory answer regarding what they were going to do to support their supply chain employees. So as we compare the actions of VF corporations to a global entity such as the World Kitchen, the cons outweigh the pros. When a multinational corporation decides to withdraw its support from those who depend on it most, millions are negatively affected by job insecurity, bad working conditions, and insufficient salaries or compensation as a result from believing in profit over people. When a series of corporations exhibit this mindset collectively, small businesses are dominated in the competitive market, and as an overall result, the needs of the individuals are rarely met, and sustainability is forgotten. Next slide, please. However, we will acknowledge that there are some pros to this machine-like mindset. Multinational corporations are well-funded. They will bounce back after the COVID-19 pandemic. They employ millions of people across the globe, and as a result, they support our fast-paced life and high demands with fast production. Next slide, please. So with these previously mentioned pros, we understand. Due to our high level of demand, research shows that societal opinions are dependent on and in favor of the machine-like marketplace worldview, or they write that the adoption of spirituality is a wild thought that is far from ever being achievable. However, we understand that the global marketplace can be monetarily beneficial, but we would like to point out, as we see from an example set by VF corporations, it normally comes at a high cost, typically the quality of life and sustainability, which further supports our overall position that the adoption and application of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and the global family mindset is beneficial to corporations, businesses, governments, and the individuals. So we just wanted to extend our gratitude to multiple groups and people. First off, including Ivana, who is here tonight. She helped co-author this original research, and she has worked continuously to support us through the process of researching. So we thank you so much. And we would like to thank Florida International University and all of the related departments and colleges that have supported us and given us this opportunity.
Again, we would not have had this opportunity if it wasn't for Dr. Nikki Frazier as well as Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. So we want to extend our thanks to them as well. Thank you all so much for your time.
You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Frazier.
I saw that. Thank you so much, Brittany and Anthony. Truly, you gave us a different insight into Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker on our panel. Dr. Taramurthy is professor of accounting and finance with over 25 years of teaching and research. He is currently in the Department of Management Studies, School of Management in Pontcharing University, and entrepreneurship is a very close issue to her heart. Dr. Taramurthy will be speaking on fearless entrepreneurial leadership in navigating post-COVID. Dr. Taramurthy.
Thank you, Dr. Nikki Fraser. And first of all, I thank Professor Sunita Sengupta for this wonderful opportunity to me. So going to the topic, fearless entrepreneurial leadership to navigate post-COVID times. So to introduce the topic, the contemporary business environment is characterized by increasing levels of complexity, turbulence, and uncertainty. For organizations to survive and thrive in this environment, they need to become more agile or adaptive. This is not merely a matter of developing an appropriate strategy and organizational structure, but also of leadership. Whatever label one attaches to it, at the core of the kind of leadership that is needed to navigate this turbulence lies the leader's ability to instill a predominant culture of collaboration, both inside the organization and between the organization and its key stakeholders. See, because of our hardwired tendency towards competition, collaboration appears to run counter to our intuitive responses when we are faced with the crisis, uncertainty, or threats. Moving from competition to collaboration is therefore not merely a matter of acquiring a new skill set or process expertise, important as those are, but primarily a matter of fundamentally changing mental models or mindsets. We have leadership theories, authentic, servant, spiritual, transformational leadership theories, which are situated within the spiritual paradigm, and they differ from classical leadership theories. These theories share similarities in so far as they emphasize personal value, transparency, and service to others, taking personal responsibility, self-awareness, and personal development. Luthans and Avoilio claim that authentic leadership is derived from positive psychological capacities and a highly developed organizational context. This leads to increased self-awareness and self-regulated positive behaviors by leaders and followers and promotes personal development. Authentic leaders are those individuals who are characterized by self-acceptance, being true to who they are, and owning their personal experiences. Again, authentic leadership has gained prominence due to its emphasis on leaders who are transparent and have a strong ethical dimension. Authentic leaders are described as those who are deeply aware of how they think and behave and are perceived by others as being aware of their own and others' values, moral perspectives, knowledge, and strengths. George argues that business journalists, the media, and the Hollywood have played strong ego-driven leaders on a pedestal and celebrate such personalities. However, it is precisely this type of leader who is at the center of leadership crisis in the world. Now, coming to the leadership challenges posed by COVID. Today, businesses operate in an environment characterized by turbulence, uncertainty, rapid technological, social, political changes, unlike anything we have experienced before, and in which the old models are becoming obsolete. This new environment is often referred to as VUCA environment, a term first applied to military strategy after the end of the Cold War, but that has become a trendy managerial acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The result is flux, instability, paralysis, doubt, dualities, distress, and increased levels of unresolved conflict. The VUCA environment affects not only businesses, but all levels of society and its institutions. In this environment, traditional leadership styles fail to deliver the innovation and entrepreneurship that is required to remain competitive. In the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, the topic of crisis management and fearless entrepreneurial leadership are at the forefront in business conversations worldwide. The crisis management helps in focus on the immediate high stake issues we are all facing and useful in the short term. But it needs a fearless entrepreneurial leadership to navigate through the crisis towards building sustainable post-COVID organizations. Many organizations are still stuck in reacting to the immediate crisis. Reaction is only the first stage of a multi-stage game. The urge to minimize damage will never, for example, result in designing creative strategies to address new needs and shape the emergence of new market segments. To balance crisis management with thinking holistically about the crisis and its aftermath, leaders need to reframe their thinking and action appropriately as each phase unfolds. There are five distinct styles of problem solving: classical, that is plan driven; adaptive, that is iterative experimentation and adjustment; shaping, co-evolution and collaboration; fourth is visionary, that is creative; and fifth is renewal, that is turning around. Each style requires adopting the right model, tools, metrics, behaviors, and leadership styles to effectively respond to the situation at hand. Organizations facing COVID-19 need to create temporal ambidexterity, that is the ability to switch and apply different problem solving styles over time. First, we need to react urgently and pragmatically to the crisis using a renewal approach. But after this reactionary phase, we need to implement planned measures to manage cash burn in the now inevitable economic downturn using a classical style. As the disease and the economic aftermath develop unpredictably, we need to learn rapidly about the latest developments and flex our tactics accordingly using an adaptive style. Every crisis contains opportunity, and once the acute phase of disease is controlled and the economic aftermath managed, we will need to think about capturing opportunities in the new post-COVID reality using visionary and shaping styles. So this broadening of how we think about and manage the crisis and the opportunity will need to take place at multiple levels: the individual level, the company level, the industry level, the country level, and at the global level. The unprecedented nature of this great pass means that few companies and managers will have experienced such a rapid succession of problem solving styles. Coming to fearless entrepreneurial leadership, the roles and responsibilities of business leaders have dramatically changed in the past few months. Before COVID-19, CEOs and other executives in high growth companies were focused on fostering innovation, driving revenue, gaining market share. Today, many of those same leaders must make rapid decisions about controlling costs and maintaining liquidity. They may encounter unforeseen roadblocks, supply chain issues, team shortages, and operational challenges that drastically alter the scope of their roles and priorities. All the while, they and their teams are navigating health and safety concerns, working remotely, and supporting their families through the pandemic. This is not an easy transition. Those in charge will be tested in areas where they have not fully developed their leadership muscles, and the learning curve will steep. They will need coaching from their own bosses and others. There are behaviors that can help leaders manage the crisis. The first can be deciding with speed over precision, because the situation is changing by the day, even by the hour. The best leaders quickly process available information, rapidly determine what matters most, and make decisions with conviction. During a crisis, cognitive overload looms. Information is incomplete. Interests and priorities may clash. The emotions and anxieties run high. So analysis paralysis can easily result, exacerbated by the natural tendency of matrix organizations to build consensus. Leaders must break through the inertia to keep the organizations trained on business continuity today, while increasing the odds of mid to long term successes by focusing on few things that matter most. A simple, scalable framework for rapid decision making is critical, like defining priorities, making smart trade offs, naming the decision, that is, name the decision makers, embracing the actions. The second action I would suggest is adapting boldly. Strong leaders get ahead of changing circumstances. They seek input and information from diverse sources and are not afraid to admit what they don't know and bring in outside experts when needed. Leaders should decide what not to do, throw out yesterday's playbook, strengthen or build direct connections to the front line. Third important action I would suggest is setting an imaginative aspiration and bold direction. Prior to COVID 19, entrepreneurial leadership was fresh thinking, having more of a startup culture and more risk tolerance. But the pandemic became an existential crisis, people with travel disruption and quarantine. Leaders need to make tough commercial decisions quickly if they were to thrive in this time of immense change. Then the fourth action they have to do is delivering reliably. The best leaders take personal ownership in a crisis. Even though many challenges and factors lie outside their control, they align team focus, establish new metrics to monitor performance, and create a culture of accountability. So, staying alerted to and aligned on a daily dashboard of priorities, setting key performance indicators and other metrics to measure performance, keeping mind and body in fighting shape. These are all required now. And fifth action I would suggest is engaging for impact. In times of crisis, no job is more important than taking care of your team. Effective leaders are understanding their team circumstances and distractions, but they find ways to engage and motivate clearly and thoroughly, communicating important new goals and information. This point deserves extra attention because although the COVID 19 pandemic is, of course, a health crisis, it has sparked a financial crisis as well. Your leaders need to reiterate new priorities frequently to ensure continued alignment in this time of constant and stressful challenge. So, connecting with individual team members, digging deep to engage your teams, asking for help as needed, ensuring a focus on both customers and employees, and collecting and amplifying positive messages about the things like successes, act of kindness, and obstacles that have been overcome. So COVID-19 is challenging leaders in areas where they have not yet tested their leadership muscles, as I said earlier. Many are experiencing a drastically altered scope of their roles and priorities and will need coaching as they learn new skills on the fly. So now coming to the lessons, leadership lessons from COVID-19. So, the leading with empathy and honesty is the first lesson leaders have learned. It has often been reported that nations led by women have handled the crisis well, particularly in the case of New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Indeed, many countries with female leaders have so far experienced lower death rates than their neighbors. Two economics professors who gave female-led countries a nearest neighbor analysis think so. No, it is not. It is also true. Not all countries led by women have had low death rates. Belgium is among the highest in the world. So, and comparing nations can be tricky, but there does seem to be a valuable leadership lesson here. Empathy, warmth, transparency serve an important purpose, whomever they come from. Second important leadership lesson is being agile. So, agility is everywhere in management guides as the previous speaker also said. Harvard Business Review says John Decree uses it to develop new machines, and National Public Radio makes programs that way. So, what exactly is agility? HPR puts it this way: agility is about taking people out of their functional silos and putting them in self managed and customer focused multidisciplinary teams. The trouble is, leaders might be ones holding back agile gains. HR consultant Mercer says 78% of the employees say they are ready to reskill. Executives believe only 45% of their workforce can adopt. Again, Mercer calls this mental block. It also thinks agility will dominate management discussions this year as companies look to rebound and reinvent. And third important lesson is valuing people. Businesses that have managed to ride out COVID-19 storm need to ask themselves how they did it. Sure, foresight and an agile mindset have been vital, but so has been attending to assets on which organizations are built, that is their people. The best leaders have already
Dr.
been doing this,
Charmuti,
often using,
Dr.
yeah,
Charmuti,
another few, yeah,
thank you
one
so
minute.
much.
Yeah,
I
to
think that
conclude,
this is a really good place
I will
for us
conclude
to.
my quote. The contemporary world and the business environment is characterized by increasing levels of that complexity. One thing I have to tell every leader out there is that we are at this strategic inflection point for our opsonization. What we decide and do now will have decades of consequential impacts. As Mark Twain rightly said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you did not do than by the ones you did so. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, and discover. With these few words, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Nikki Fraser and other participants for patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charmuti. Those words of wisdom that we talk about organizational leadership in public policy and administration, and I know it is a very, very important topic. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Savannah, Associate Professor of Commerce at University of Delhi. And for this conference, he's speaking on organizations, a spiritual configuration. Dr. Savannah, you have 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really feel overwhelmed, and much of what I probably wanted to say has been said by our panelists, and especially the keynote speaker, Dr. Formika. So there is a kind of a crisis of existence for me. However, I got a small presentation to share with you, wherein I am trying to argue whether we can configure organizations as spiritual entities. Because organizations exert a pervasive influence, and we know the enormous power that the organizations have on our lives. So, what if we were to configure the organizations spiritually, and whether it is possible or not, and if it is so, then what is going to be the framework? I'm sharing my screen. It will take a minute for me to move from here to my presentation. It is here. I hope you can all see. I'm putting it on the slideshow mode. I wish to thank you. I wish to thank Avilasa because I have stolen this theme, the floral theme from the brochure, the beautiful brochure that was designed for the conference. It lends a lot of spirituality to the whole thing.
Dr. Savannah, the screen is blank. You had it for a minute, and now we're looking at a blank screen.
Is it not there now?
No.
I will maybe sharing is paused somehow. I will try and resume it if it is possible. Has it been kind of stopped from the end of the? Okay.
Yes, you'll have to come out, and then go back into share screen.
Maybe. I'll do that.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. So once I play it, maybe then it doesn't show. Is the text readable on screen?
Yes, it is.
Oh, perfect. Then I will keep it like this so that the flow is not disturbed. It was an awesome curtain raiser yesterday, and I remember Fraser telling us that we greet in Florida by saying what you call Morvening, right? And then Unalkar sir told us that in Australia they say good day to bridge this time gap.
Good day.
Yeah. And another important learning from yesterday, and I have added this slide yesterday only, that spirituality like gravity is also pervasive, and how we can, traverse from individual spaces to the global and cosmic, kind of a spirituality. that's the kind of theme, and organizations come in between. So my position is about situating organizations as spiritual entities. There is a story, how this presentation emerged, and it emerged in 2019 when I was making a presentation in a Harmony conference in Bangalore. When I showed this Mintzberg, this is a familiar organizational structure configuration by Henry Mintzberg. When I showed it to the participants, the kind of responses that came were that, oh, there's a sage surrounded by an aura sitting in lotus posture, and somebody said it is Buddha. So from there, this thought process, originated, whether we can actually configure the organizations as spiritual entities. So what would be the beginning point? The beginning point was a kind of what you call interpretive extrapolation of Mintzberg's, the configuration. And we could, and in our conversations today, we have seen that how the strategic apex can be looked at as the forehead and the fountainhead of enlightenment and aspirational yearning that the speakers have talked about, and how it is situated in the noosphere of our consciousness and conscience. And that the spine in yoga, we place a lot of emphasis on the role of spine in rendering the integrity to the whole existence. So, I started with these interpretive explorations, and I conducted a social media survey to understand how our, my friends on the social media, essentially academics, they look at spirituality, and the kind of research that, the data that we got. So I created a word cloud out of that. And the data yielded not only the meaning and the interpretations of the term spirituality in terms of rootedness, connectedness, transcendence, and generosity that we have already spoken about, its location, where the spirituality is located. So it belongs to the realms of the soul, right? And the process through which it, might be, kind of awakened of introspection, we talked about, and from journey from self to the organizational self and so on. And the kind of outcomes that it is likely to bring about, and how these outcomes have become very important in the post-COVID scenarios, right? And the whole value system that we need to have in the post-COVID scenario. Moving on, I conducted a sentiment analysis on Google Ngram to see how these ideas have kind of emerged and have become especially relevant 2000 onwards. We have had a financial crisis of 2008, and then we have had a pandemic now. Now, how these values have become very important, and in our conversations, in organizational and personal spheres. So my position with regard to organizational spirituality that emerges from the literature review is this, that as of now, there is no generally accepted definition of organizational spirituality. And there is a problem, if we reify the concept of spirituality to an inanimate object such as organizations, then probably it will attain the same attributes that of organizational culture. We have questioned this, and we say that no, there is a merit in looking at organizations as spiritual entities, especially with regard to the interface that will happen between the individual and the organization. My next slide talks about this. So a very simplistic articulation of a 2x2 matrix, wherein personal spirituality and organizational spirituality are the two dimensions. And what we are saying is that it is a journey, from the, for example, northeast corner to the northwest corner. And we can really realize the magnificent aspects of spirituality that all the speakers have talked about by allowing ourselves to flow and to continually evolve in the process. So spirituality is to be attained. Yes, it exists there like gravity. I would concur with Professor Nahalkar on this, but then we have to discover it maybe within, and we have to keep, kind of developing it and keep putting it in practice so that we are able to realize the ideal of spiritual organizations. And how will that happen? How will that happen? Um, the framework that I have taken, because I have to focus on the essentials, I have got just 10 minutes. I have tried to integrate, the personal spirituality domain with the organizational spirituality domain. And I have talked the journey in terms of the corporeal self. Yes, it is quite possible that I start as a profit-making entity and profit-seeking entity, because that is how I have been trained, how my management education has trained me to achieve my results, whatever which way. But however, through a process of enlightenment, it is possible to redefine my, organizational culture, to redefine my organizational purpose, and redesign my organizational processes like governance, leadership, communication, and motivation, and also to evolve holistic measures of organizational performance, such as the quadruple bottom line. So, to my mind, therefore, what I carry is that this articulation of organizations as spiritual entity is essentially a hopeful development in view of the pervasive influence of organizations on people and planet. And we have shown here that it is possible beyond mere interpretive and extrapolative contemplations of mind. And the good news is that a survey of mid to top level executives has shown that contrary to the expectation that participants define success in materialistic terms, they use expressions such as being connected, balance, and wholeness to define and describe success. So if we have to realize this ideal of organizations as spiritual entity, we have to begin with our management education, and we have to kind of bring about a deeper learning rather than surface learning. In the and University of Florida is just doing that, and I mean to say it is so amazing and it's so good that we are focusing on this movement from data, information, knowledge, wisdom, and value hierarchy. And then, of course, so we have to continually do the research, the kind of our predecessor, Anthony and have done to highlight and validate spiritual construction of organizations. Yes, it is possible. And we have to generate enough evidence and to move from a pro bono, stray, practices into a community of practice. I think that is where I will rest my presentation. You see a social media post that has recently gone viral, guides us that look, happiness is the new rich, kindness is the new cool, health is the new wealth, and inner peace is the new success. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. What a wonderful, wonderful thought to leave us with. Thank you so much, Dr. Sushana. What we are going to do, if you could stop share, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
What we are going to do right now to stay on task and on time. Thank you so much. So far, our wonderful speakers. We were supposed to have a question and answer period, but we're going to go right into the plenary session. And after our plenary speaker, we will open up to all the panel members and the plenary speaker. We will open up the question period. So Anthony, if you could please take us into the plenary session, I would appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Frazier. All righty, everyone. I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Dr. Agatha Carballo. She will be our session chair for this plenary session. Dr. Agatha Carballo is an associate teaching professor and the assistant chair for the Department of Public Policy and Administration at Florida International University, as well as the director of undergraduate certificate in leadership studies. She is the immediate past chair of the National Section for Women in Public Administration, SWPA, for the American Society for Public Administration, ASPA, and from 2011 until June 2020, she served on the board of directors for the ASPA South Florida chapter as a past chapter president from 2016 through 2017. Dr. Carballo was the inaugural director of the Bachelor of Public Administration program at FIU in 2015, which helped launch a fully online option that bestcolleges.com ranked #1 in the nation in 2018 and 2019. It is my immense pleasure to introduce a wonderful person who I've worked with a little bit, Dr. Carballo.
Good evening and good morning. I'm really excited to be with all of you today, and I guess in some cases tomorrow. This has been an outstanding event. Thank you again, Dr. Frazier, for the invitation. I just want to take an opportunity to commend Anthony and Brittany for an outstanding presentation. This really has been a pleasure to be a part of this. I'm really excited to be serving as a moderator for one of my mentors, Dr. Meredith Newman, who we'll be getting to meet. And I'm not sure, Anthony, you'll be providing her introduction, her bio? Okay, fantastic. So I actually, as Anthony had mentioned, I'm the immediate past chair of the section for women in public administration, which is actually an organization that I learned about from my mentor, Dr. Meredith Newman, who is also a past chair of SWAPA. So we're really excited to talk to you about feminine leadership. So with that, I'll allow Anthony to introduce Dr. Newman, and then I'll pull up the presentation.
Awesome. So Dr. Meredith Newman is a professor of public administration at Florida International University. In her immediate past role as vice provost for faculty at Global Affairs, she worked to oversee all initiatives that support faculty, including recruitment, promotion, and retention of faculty and other areas as they relate to professionalized faculty, and career progression. Additionally, she oversaw FIU Global, which centralizes the university's global initiatives in regards to planning, facilitating, coordinating, and initiating partnerships with international institutions and organizations. I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Dr. Meredith Newman.
Thank you so very much, Anthony, and congratulations to you and Brittany for really, passionately delivered and inspired words. Thank you both. It's such an honor for me to participate with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Agatha Carballo, this evening. And I would first like to begin by sincerely thanking Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta as conference chair, and my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Nikki Fraser, as conference co-chair, and also to Dr. Rayner, chairman, and to our host, Mr. Anthony Wooten. So thank you to each of you, heartfelt thanks. I was thinking about, we could go to the first slide if you would be so kind. Thank you, Agatha. I was thinking.
I'm sorry, Dr. Fraser, can you make me the host so I can share the PowerPoint?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I was reflecting on Dr. Frank's comments about FIU.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. And the fact that we are built on an airfield. And President Rosenberg of FIU frequently says, we are building the plane as we are flying it. And I think, that's another form of leadership, that we are able to adapt and be entrepreneurial at the same time as we are, flying high. I would like to begin my presentation with, next slide, please. Yeah, just the overview. And I thought it was appropriate to spend 1 or 2 minutes telling you a little bit about my story, because this is a conference around spirituality, and I'll be speaking about feminine leadership. If you wouldn't mind going back to the overview, thank you. So that's what I'm going to start off with. And then I'm going to speak very briefly about each one of these items: affective leadership and emotional labor, styles of leadership and the gendered expectations that embed them, And then why can't a woman be less like a man? I think that's an interesting twist on the Henry Higgins Pygmalion, why can't a woman be more like a man? What do countries with the best COVID-19 responses have in common? And Dr. Chaumathi, excuse me, spoke a little bit about this, but I want to expand on her comments briefly. And then female leaders in COVID, responding to the global pandemic, and then finish up with some lessons for meeting the challenges of post-COVID times and other natural and man-made disasters. So briefly, my story, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and was married to my first husband in 1971. And when I married him, I was working for the Australian Foreign Service, and I had to resign my posting and then reapply to attempt to get my job back as a married woman, whereas the men were not similarly situated. When I got up to Canberra, the headquarters for the Foreign Service, I was told that I would not be able to be assigned to one of our embassies abroad because I was separated from my husband. And I asked the question, what do I need to do to be treated the same as any separated man or divorced man or so forth? And I was told that I needed to get a letter of permission from my husband for the government to assign me overseas. So I did so. It was one of the most, gut-wrenching experiences to have to ask permission to do something that I wanted to do as an adult. But anyway, since that day, since my get out of jail free card, my letter of permission, I've literally never looked back. And I have worked hard, been a path breaker, as many of our other panelists and participants have been and are. And I'm proud of that. And I think it can only sort of enrich and enhance my research when I come to look at the theories, to remember my own experiences. And I'm comfortable sharing my personal experiences in this way. And, as we are each doing this evening, sort of lowering the barriers between personal and professional. And anybody who's had a Zoom embarrassment at home working can relate, I'm sure. Next slide, please. So effective leadership and emotional labor. And here I'm talking about affective leadership. I've been studying the concept of emotional labor for the past 20 years, and it's often used interchangeably with the phrase emotional intelligence. But I'd like to just begin by distinguishing between the two concepts. Emotional labor resides with the job. It is the position itself that requires the performance of emotional labor and emotive skills. On the other hand, emotional intelligence rests with the person. So I can be an emotionally intelligent person, but never have to engage in emotional labor at work, because emotional labor, as the name implies, is labor paid compensated for work that is compensated. Emotional labor is really defined as emotion management. So, think of someone on the worst day of their lives and an emergency services personnel or a disaster responder. And that public servant, for the most part, or non-profit worker, needs to manage his or her own emotions while at the same time is attempting to manage the emotions of the other, all for the purposes of doing one's job effectively. So it's really about emotion regulation that was mentioned earlier, And we find our research that I've been doing with my colleagues, Mary Guy and Sharon Mastracci, that those who possess the skill of self-awareness, which is something that the previous speaker spoke of, are more likely to perform well in jobs that involve high intensity than others. I just draw your attention to two of the books, our two books that we've written, and a little bit of self-promotion here. They've garnered 5 Best Book Awards, so I'm really proud of that work, and it's taught me a great deal. So how does emotional labor relate to affective leadership? And here I refer you to the work of Janet and Bob Denhart, their 2006 book. It's called The Dance of Leadership. And I wrote an article that was published in Public Administration Review a number of years ago on, it was titled something like Beyond Cognition, Affective Leadership and Emotional Labor. And I draw quite heavily on their work. And one of the biggest takeaways for me from their research was that in order to be a real leader, a true leader, you have to make an emotional connection with your subordinates, with your followers. It's that emotional connection that is inspirational, that motivates subordinates and followers. So next slide, please. So these are rather stereotypical styles of leadership and the gendered expectations that imbue masculine and feminine styles. And I just wanted to begin here by saying male leaders can overcome gendered expectations, of course, but that it's less politically costly for women to do so. In other words, women don't have to violate perceived gender norms if they act in a caring and loving and inclusive manner. So traditional masculine, you know, I couldn't help myself here by putting male drivers never ask for directions. I know this is true in my own household. Certainly, it can be true for some men. Strongman leadership, one who conforms to the ideals of masculinity, projects power, acts aggressively, shows no fear. I mean, if, you know, I was trying to avoid mentioning President Donald Trump in my comments, but I would argue that he has been characterized and is characterized as such a leader. On the other hand, feminine leadership traits include inclusivity. Again, previous speaker spoke of that. Democratic behaviors, we're in this together. Interpersonal and collaborative skills, not competitive. Risk averse and empathetic, caring and thoughtful. Thank you. Camilla Stivers gave a presentation which is on YouTube, and I will find it and send it to Dr. Sengupta and Dr. Fraser. And her YouTube video is called "Why Can't a Woman Be Less Like a Man?" And I just love that. And here she talks, I'm also referencing her work in her book, Gender Images in Public Administration. She has a chapter in there that's called Look Like a Lady, Act Like a Man. And if you think about that for a moment, it really dooms women. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't. If we act like a man, we're going to be differentially evaluated. Certainly, looking like a lady and acting like a man the work experiences for many women in the United States, in Australia, and I would argue in many other countries, are still characterized by glass ceilings, glass walls, sticky floors, and trapdoors. And the sticky floors here are low-paying jobs compressed at the lower levels in the pink ghettos, is a 1970s phrase. Trapdoors here, I'm referring to a claim of sexual harassment or sexual assault. Women traditionally have been punished for coming forward in that way. And there's a gender double bind. A strong leader traditionally is one who conforms to the ideals of masculinity, which leads to difficulties for female leaders. The expectation that we should be aggressive and domineering to conform to that common standard leaves women acting in that way as being viewed as unfeminine. So again, I love that. I recommend that chapter to you in Stiver's book, Look Like a Lady, Act Like a Man. It's quite revealing. And our previous speaker spoke of this as well, and I won't repeat what she said. So what do countries with the best COVID-19 responses have in common? I mean, one answer is women in charge, leading ladies. And I see Anthony smiling and nodding his head. I love that expression, leading ladies. Certainly the Czech Republic, Australia, Vietnam are examples where male leaders have done extraordinary work as it relates to responding to COVID. But I like this phrase that I found, that few countries with women leaders haven't got the job done. Most affected countries is my own adopted country of the United States, Brazil, Russia, Spain, UK, Italy, and France, led by men. Average number of deaths per million, this is in July, 445. Nations that manage the crisis best, again, data from July, Germany, Taiwan, New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Denmark, led by women, average deaths per million is 51. So again, that's a snapshot of several months into the pandemic, but I think it is certainly a signal, perhaps not a conclusion, that so I have the caveat here that it's misleading and lacking context to say that those successes and failures are solely due to gender. And I just wanted to highlight the names of half a dozen or so female leaders. And if you're interested, you know, if you haven't already looked at some of these women, quite extraordinary. Previous speaker mentioned Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and I love her expression, go hard and go early. And that's what she did. And you can see the other female leaders there. It's a little bit distressing that only 7% of our world's leaders are women. So very small sample from which to draw conclusions. So certainly this is a cautious note. And the presence of a female leader may be a signal that a country is more inclusive, has more inclusive political institutions and values. So I'm coming towards the end of my presentation. I'm mindful of the time. Responding to the global pandemic, some common threads that I drew from the literature around women's leadership during the pandemic. Again, our previous speaker mentioned some of these: trust, decisiveness. And I think decisiveness for both male and female leaders of success stories is key. Technology, use of technology, love, care, compassion, with women more comfortable expressing love and caring and compassion. Risk averse with regard to saving lives, but willing to take risks regarding the economy. The next one to me is very important, recognizing expertise and asking experts for advice. With a singular vision to save lives, saving lives was the priority. And I like this phrase, rational optimists. It's a phrase I quote Wittenberg Cox, use of that phrase. Humility to listen to outside voices with diverse backgrounds and experiences. Being willing to have channels for dissent, not shutting those down, but embracing those, learning from them. Levels of urgency and action, proactive and coordinated policy responses. And I really like this last one, women rise for all. Women's leadership benefits the whole community. And that's the notion of when Anthony was speaking about family versus market and the greater good concept. Here I'm referencing the Deputy Secretary, UN Deputy Secretary General sentiments as well. So some lessons for meeting the challenges, not only of post-COVID times, but in the next crisis. And we know that, you know, there will be others lining up. So I'm looking at the experience and the responses of the COVID, and extrapolating from that to the next crisis. Include everyone, be authentic. And I think that's a really powerful one. It took me many, many, many years in my professional life to be willing to be myself. You know, I was oftentimes modeling my presentations and my leadership style and my use of a black briefcase on all of my male professors. But I've got away from that. And I think Jacinda Ardern's casual Facebook live session when she just put a toddler or toddlers, I don't recall now, to bed. I think she was in very casual attire and checked in with her citizenry. And I thought that was so powerful. Tell the truth, it builds trust. Angela Merkel's reliance on facts and also a willingness to voice unsettling truths when, you know, she reminded her countrymen and women that things will become more difficult. Be decisive, as we've said, act quickly. Thailand's Tai Ing-wen's proactive pandemic plan that was prepared after the SARS outbreak put them in a very good position to be able to act decisively and with great speed. Clarity in the message, to me, that's another key one. And that's something that we've struggled with in the United States with conflicting messages. It's really represented a significant hindrance, in my opinion. Embrace technology. Iceland's Prime Minister's screening and tracking system. Finland, the Prime Minister of Finland, I think, is about 35 years old. And she really embraced social media and influencers to spread the word about COVID, how to protect oneself and so forth. And I'd like to conclude by, you know, just sort of repeating something or saying something that each one of you, I'm sure, would agree with, and that is we can all use our positions to affect change, and that the global pandemic has shone a bright light on the power and the promise of feminine leadership. That concludes my comments, but I'd like to turn it to Agatha, Dr. Caraballo, for before we'll hold off on the Q&A until the general Q&A. But Dr. Caraballo, any remarks on from your perspective?
Yes, no, thank you. As I was, listening to these talks and also with all the other speakers, a couple of keywords just kept coming back, and on this page, being authentic, self-awareness, just kind of knowing kind of who you are so that you can, put yourself in a way that's true, that's, you're conveying your values, personal and also organizational in the ways that we can convey. I also think now in this time, even with our recent election and having our first female vice president elect in Kamala Harris, it automatically created a perception within the country that it's a new era of inclusivity. And of course, right now, some of the big buzzwords that are going around, diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just in terms of race, but also in terms of gender. And I think of examples like Chile's recent referendum in October to rewrite their constitution and make sure that women were included, that they had at least 50% say in rewriting it. So we think about these women, these leaders that have been successful, and I think a big part of it is because they were able to take it from one of our thought leaders from PA, Mary Parker Follett, more of a web network. It's about building connections. It's not just a straight up and down hierarchy. You really have to pull people in and collaborate up, down, sideways in order to bring everybody in and to build a network, a community that's going to hopefully come together to try and find solutions. Because again, we can't do it together. But the buy-in, when you have that leadership at the top, it's easier to get it from all ends when you can have leaders that you can believe in and you truly believe that are invested in your best interests and not just their own, and it reflects again in their values. So thank you again for the presentations. I guess at this point, Dr. Fraser, do we have time to move to Q&A?
We have one question that I'd like for you and Dr. Newman to tackle, and then we're going to send it back to Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta to give us a wrap up. And we also have Dr. Amy Galpin, who will be giving us a very unique tour of an exhibit at the FIU Frost Museum. So there is one question if you'd like to talk about it with Dr. Newman.
That's good. Do you want me to go through the questions? So
Avilasha will take up the question.
All right, I got it. How fair, Dr. Newman and Dr. Caraballo, how fair would it be to say that digital revolution of everything in COVID era has or will aid the rise of women in leadership and business?
I think that's a really interesting question, sort of to be determined. Certainly from my perspective, the potential is there. The workplace, from my viewpoint, has been forever altered. What I didn't mention was the unequal burden that COVID has placed on female workers, on women. And, I'm not sure, and their families, but it is the case that women are bearing the brunt of the downturn in the economy, losing jobs, their jobs being sacrificed for their partners, their spouses, for example. But in terms of the sort of this new revolution, if you like, of technology, I mean, I feel as if I'm, in the dark ages. The first time I heard the word social media influencer, I had no idea what that was. It didn't take me long to figure it out, but it's a whole new world out there, and I'm excited to be at the precipice of it. I mean, speaking of technology, I learned to type on a manual typewriter with carbon paper. So, we've come a long way. So I do believe that I am optimistic, rationally optimistic, that that new technologies will continue to provide opportunities for those, maybe in terms of access, for those who have the opportunity to grab those opportunities. I don't have a really, substantial answer other than to say that I feel that it's something worthy of keeping a close eye on and seeing what kind of impact it has, to the extent to which it is similar or different across race, gender, and so forth.
Perhaps.
Dr. Fraser, there's one more question addressed to Dr. Meredith Newman from one of our attendees. Yeah, and she asks that when women are elected in leadership positions at organizations that are patriarchal in their very structure, what is your advice to move past the tokenism and to actually bring change at the organizational level?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've been living that,
Yeah.
I mean, be authentic.
Bring more women in.
Excuse me?
I said we need, that's the thing, is we need more women in the top to make that a more inclusive kind of environment. And just to kind of piggyback off your comments earlier, I think a lot of the questions that we're going to be finding as far as for work-life balance are going to depend on the organizations and the government support, for child caregiving responsibilities. There's some benefits to being able to work remotely in this new environment, but also in the sense of whether we're taking care of not only children, maybe elderly parents, just general community needs. We need to be able to find support, to be able to find those balances in our own lives. And I think a lot of that is that it's not going to change until there's more representation. I know, I'm sure some of you seen Paris is now in trouble for having too many women, on the opposite. And so I think sometimes it's finding that balance.
I do think we can, my second to last bullet, we can all use our positions to affect change. Within our own circles of influence, support other women, support support men who want to advance men and women equally, and be a role model, be a as a role model, be a mentor, and give of our time, such that each of us has a story and lessons can be learned from those stories. We don't have, we could spend an hour trying to answer that question. It's a great question. I'd be happy to engage offline afterwards.
And even though Dr. Jacob's question in the chat regarding Schedule F, I'm just going to kind of jump to his question at the end, is could the decision burden leadership qualities for both senior and frontline managers? And he's specifically referring to a federal kind of government thing, but I think the decision making a lot of times is of those of leaders are formed by the culture of the organization. So there's some leaders that are going to take a more collaborative approach to their decision making, knowing how it's going to affect, those. And then there are others that are going to just kind of make more unilateral decisions. And we would hope that part of what we're trying to move toward is having decision makers that are going to include everyone, as again, the first point on the slide.
I would just add to Agatha by saying that Schedule F, we know this in the United States, if it's enacted, will have an absolutely, I would argue, devastating effect on the ability of the government, federal government, to be able to address the economic crisis and the not least of, and the pandemic, if indeed those employees become at will and they can be fired, and it would take it takes about 100 days to hire a federal government employee in the United States. So that's months, 3+ months of a vacuum. So dangerous times.
And that's just one example of how decision-making can have widespread and long-term consequences, that sometimes when decisions are being made, they're not even apparent until the consequences are being felt later on down the road.
I want to step in very quickly. Thank you both so much, but I want to make sure that we get to our, do you have a final comment?
Sorry, could I just say one more thing, just 30 seconds?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was researching for this our presentation, there was a lot in the literature about this new feminine leadership style, but it's not new. I mean, women have been. I just see the comment, feminine ethics of care, nurturing, inclusivity are especially desirable now more than ever. Maybe it's becoming, fashionable and more visible, and I think that's powerful. So let's see if we can keep the momentum going, because I think it has benefits for all. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I 100% agree with what you both said. And on a personal anecdote, I was raised by a single mother, so I've seen firsthand that there is no strength that I've seen more than that lies within a woman. I just want that to be known universally. With that being said, everyone, I want to make sure that we have time to get to our awesome surprise at the end and our awesome experience, our tour. So we're going to go ahead and let Dr. Sunita Singh Gupta give us some closing statements and final remarks in regards to today's sessions.
Thank you, Anthony. I take this opportunity to share that my contact to FIU was established by Professor Sushil Gupta, who is alumnus of Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, and is a professor of operations management at the FIU Business School. Then the second point of contact was Professor Sumit Kundu, through which I reached out to Meredith Newman when I was planning for Fulbright scholarship. And then through Newman and Sumit, I reached out to Dr. Stephanie Dosher, and through Dr. Stephanie Dosher, I reached out to Dr. Nikki Fraser. So the journey has been wonderful throughout, reaching out from one heart to the other heart. So today, we started this 2-day virtual international conference on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID times. So for more than a decade and a half, we have been, Isol Foundation have been committed for this. So we started with where I shared the trajectory of Isol Foundation and talked about the background of this conference, which was further added by Dr. Nikki Fraser. Then our chairman, Dr. J.L. Raina, welcomed all the delegates and shared his thoughts. We had the inaugural address by Dr. Howard Frank, and who talked about the foundations of FIU and the Metropolitan Center. It was wonderful to listen to Dr. Sandro Formica as a keynote speaker, and Sandro Formica talked about self-science and how it leads to happiness, and from their self to organizational leadership. We had first panel discussion on integrating spirituality into business and society, where Dr. Nikki Fraser was the moderator. We had speakers, Anthony and Brittany, who talked about Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, moving from world as a global market to world as a global family. We had Professor B. Charumati from Pondicherry University, who talked on entrepreneurial mindset, navigating this difficult mindset. And then we had Dr. Anand Saxena, who talked about spiritual entity. and in organizations. So after this panel discussion, we had a plenary session by no one other than Dr. Newman Murdoch, and it was a great pleasure, not only as a conference chair, but also as a woman leader, to listen about your thoughts on feminine leadership and how beautifully it talks about inclusivity in the mindset. So this was what we covered today, and I'm looking forward for tomorrow's deliberations. And I thank all the distinguished speakers and all the students who have attended and the attendees. I know Shobit is here, our FMS student. The other question, second question, was asked by Aisha Sengupta from USA, who works on feminine leadership. So we had a very lively discussion. So thank you very much. Now up to Anthony.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. We all are so appreciative of the work that you put into this conference. As we go into tomorrow and getting ready for our next session, I just want to say thank you all so much for your time. Remember, as Dr. Sengupta said, we're starting tomorrow, same time, 6:30. We want to go ahead and get into our last presentation of the night. It is our virtual tour. You will see nothing like this anywhere. You're going to see some wonderful art. And I feel like that's a very positive way to end the night, because art is a universal way that we can all stay connected. So I want to introduce Dr. Amy Galpin. Dr. Amy Galpin is the Chief Curator at the Frost Museum of Art at Florida International University in Miami. She is formerly the curator at the Cornell Fine Arts Museum of Rollins College and associate curator of the Americas at San Diego Museum of Art. In addition to exhibitions at these institutions, she has also curated exhibitions for Ulit Arts, Miami, Museum of Contemporary Art, North Miami, National Museum of Mexican Art, Chicago, Women Made Art Gallery, Chicago, Pasadena Museum of California Art, and the Menelo, Museum of American Art in Orlando. Her exhibitions include solo projects with artists Ruben Ortiz Torres, Patrick Martinez, Hugo Crossway, Jess T. Dugan, and Li Xian, amongst others. I have the immense honor of introducing Dr. Amy Galpin.
Before Amy takes us to the virtual tour, I would like to thank the team who, because after this virtual tour, we'll be meeting tomorrow, right? So I would like to thank Anthony and the team who has been working with me, Rohit Shah, Amarjeet, and Avilasha Sengupta, for starting off this conference today. So up to Amy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh Sengupta. Thank you so much for all of your efforts to organize this conference. Thank you, Anthony, for that wonderful introduction. I enjoyed your presentation earlier. And of course, I want to send my greetings and gratitude to Dr. Nikki Frazier, who is an incredible collaborator and advocate for students at FIU. And it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I'm hoping I won't have any tech issues. I was having a little bit of sound earlier, but if you can write in the chat and let me know if there are any issues. So Dr. Frazier invited me tonight to share with you a virtual tour at the museum. Like many museums, we've been pivoting to digital programming during the pandemic. But even before the pandemic started, we had begun to use Matterport technology, which a lot of times is used to see the insides of houses for real estate. But we began using this technology to create virtual tours of our exhibitions. The idea being to increase access. Even if you live in Miami, it might not be easy to make it to the museum after a busy work week, or there might be economic or physical barriers that make it difficult to visit the museum. So these virtual tours not only increase our audience internationally, but they also increase our audience locally. Picking up off of Dr. Meredith Newman's presentation on women, we're inside a current exhibition at the Frost Art Museum called House to House, Women, Politics, and Place. At the Frost Art Museum at FIU, we do about 10 to 12 exhibitions a year, and we have about 6,500 works in our permanent collection. Back in 2018, we had decided that we wanted to do an exhibition that looked at the intersection of politics and place as it pertained to women in the United States. As many of you know, in 2018 in the US, a historic number of women were elected to the US House of Representatives. Looking ahead to 2020, we knew our country would have a presidential election. We didn't know if any of the candidates would be women, but we were interested in looking at women's issues. In putting together this exhibition, I focused on lots of different types of places, from courtrooms to factories, to the streets, to the domestic space. And the domestic space ended up being kind of a central focus of the exhibition as a site for oppression, as a site for safety, as a site for community and agency. It can mean myriad things to different people. I'm touring you, moving you through this show, and I wanted to highlight a few works in the exhibition. One of them is by an artist named Wendy Red Star, and the piece is called Apsalaka Feminist. Apsalaka means crow, and the artist Wendy Red Star, whoops, my driving is a little out of control. Wendy Red Star grew up on a Crow reservation in Montana. This is a portrait of Wendy with her daughter Bee. She currently lives in Portland, Oregon. Even the title of the exhibition, title of the work rather, I think proposes something quite interesting. You know, Apsalaka Feminist. In the title alone, she's arguing for a more diverse and inclusive feminism. You know, in the US, histories of feminism have often focused on white women. And here we have her arguing for an indigenous feminism. Wendy Red Star often depicts herself and her daughter Bee in her work. Her daughter Bee, she considers to be a chief collaborator in the work. She asks her opinion, she incorporates her ideas into the final work. One of the things that's very interesting, I think, about this piece is there's a lot of attention to traditional Crow culture, and Crow society is matrilineal. In dress, there's a doll in the corner of the couch, a beaded bag, but they're also sitting on their IKEA couch in their home in Portland. So there's this sense of the indigenous present, right? Not that these the cultural heritage and these items are very much a part of their lives in the present, and that things mix together, and it's not, indigenous culture doesn't exist in a vacuum. Next to Wendy Red Star's piece is the work of Ramiro Gomez. Ramiro Gomez is a Los Angeles-based artist. He is the son of Mexican migrant workers. He left art school and got a job working as a nanny in the Hollywood Hills. And he would, watch after the children in these very luxurious homes. And when the children would go to bed at night, he would flip through the magazine pages that were around the house. And it was these high-end magazines with, fabulous interiors like Architectural Digest and Dwell magazine. And he wondered, where was the labor? Where was his family and his friends and all of the people that worked in these beautiful spaces? So as a part of an ongoing series, he enlarges images from magazine pages, which is what you see here, and he inserts the labor into the scene. He has said in his work, he aims to make visible what is invisible. Moving around here, there's a lot of photography in this exhibition. There's music videos, there's doll houses. This work here is by an artist named Leonard Suryajaya. Leonard Suryajaya is of Chinese descent. He grew up in Indonesia, and he now lives in Chicago, Illinois. This work is titled Arisan. It's a photograph of family friends and family members that he made in the lobby of his parents' apartment building in Indonesia. And the lobby was actually decorated for Chinese New Year. And he was home visiting his family, and he thought immediately, I have a vision for a photograph. He uses a large format camera, which is quite heavy, and the exposure time is incredibly long. So it's a very intimate experience when he creates these elaborate tableaus. The subjects are often posed for an hour to 2 hours at any given time. The women in this photograph are wearing different clothes associated with different regions in Indonesia. And again, the title of the piece is Arisan. And Leonard Suryajaya talks about this piece, the title, he calls it a microloan program for women. And he's referring to gatherings of women where they might get together, share conversation, share food, but money is put into a collective pot. And 1 or 2 women take home that money after each gathering. And, thinking about women supporting women, women being drivers, economic drivers for their community. He was also, in creating this photograph, thinking about the women's marches that took place in January 2017 in the US and across the globe. So for him, it was also this reference to Arisan and these gatherings of women, while also considering the women's marches that had taken place in DC. This tour kind of gives you a sense of the Frost Art Museum and the physical space there. It's about 45,000 square feet. It's a 4-floor facility and 3 galleries of exhibition space. You can take, we have about 12 tours like this available on our website, frost.fiu.edu, and you're always welcome to check them out and take them on your own. This is another photograph by Leonard Suryajaya. It's a portrait of his sister. His sister is a frequent muse. She was home from school in Australia, and she was feeling particularly self-conscious. So Leonard recalled that he kind of had to coax her into posing for him in this picture. And she agreed if she could wear a mask. And she's actually wearing chicken slices on her face. And here she is at home with this bedspread that has this wonderful pattern, but also has these kind of wrinkles to it. And she's taking a selfie, sort of going behind the scenes of the domestic space. I always, when I think of this photograph, I also think of the positioning of her body as well, because there's like such a level of, it's both awkward and comfortable. Almost the only in your own home, right? Might you even dare to sit like that. A few other things I would like to point out about the exhibition before we continue, before we wrap up rather, is this wall here has a series of works that look at the relationship between women and war. In the US during both World War I and World War II, Images of women, tropes of women were used to increase support for the war effort, either at home in the domestic space, women were encouraged to do their part, or in the workplace, in the factory, like you see in the image on the right. The poster says, "The more women at work, the sooner we win." The central image here is actually a contemporary piece by a feminist artist. And in installing the exhibition, I wanted to have this conversation between these two posters on either side that were made during World War II and this more contemporary work. The contemporary work is thinking about how we are inundated with images. And sometimes when we become inundated with images, we become desensitized. And the artist, Martha Rosler, began a series during the Vietnam War called Bringing the War Home, in which she juxtaposed images of the Vietnam War within the domestic space. And the image in our exhibition, House to House, Women, Politics, and Place, it uses images from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and again, positions them within the domestic space. In this part of the exhibition, I was literally trying to evoke a home. And so you have a stove here. This stove was released in 1935. It is called the Magic Chef. And it was advertised as a way in which women in the US would be liberated through the use of such a modern and sleekly designed stove. So much so that it was called the Magic Chef. This work is in the collection of the Wilsonian, and at Florida International University, we're very lucky that we have 3 museums. Our museum, the Frost Art Museum, and then also the Wilsonian at FIU, which focuses on design and propaganda art, and then the Jewish Museum of Florida. Juxtaposed with this oven is a work by the artist Jamila Sabor. She is a Miami-based artist, originally born in Jamaica. And in fact, this work hung way up high due to the artist's preference, refers to her grandmother's home in Jamaica. It is above this form. She's replicating this form that's found above the doorway of her grandmother's home in Jamaica. And it's not just her grandmother's home, it's also the home where her mother was raised. So I thought this was an excellent work to include in the exhibition because we have this sense of 3 generations of women, this notion of place, memory, also migration. It is a form too that reoccurs a lot in Jamila's work. And here we see it in its kind of thought of being this decorative element that is above a doorway, installed so high here in the galleries. But it appears in Jamila Sabor's performance work and paintings as well. Before we wrap up, I'll just go to the last room to show you a few more works. One of the works in the exhibition that was made specifically for the project is by the artist Aurora Molina. She's a Cuban-American artist and a graduate of Florida International University. And this work is called Woven Destiny. And there are 100 mandalas here in the installation that are all connected and made with t-shirt yarn. And for the artist Aurora Molina, she engages the community in the creation of her work. So she held several workshops leading up to the installation of this exhibition. And different community members made these forms, which then she connects to these women protesters. And like Leonard Suryajaya, Aurora Molina was inspired by the women's marches that took place in January 2017. This is a photograph that she took, based on a photograph that she took here in Miami following the women's marches. And then she saved that photograph, made a drawing, and then converted it into this t-shirt yarn fiber art design for our exhibition. And during the course of the exhibition, we were really lucky that Aurora led 3 different workshops to further engage our community. So maybe I'll leave you there, just giving you kind of a taste of the exhibition. There are lots of posters in the show, posters that deal with a protest against night work for women in 1938 New York, posters that address HIV/AIDS awareness, posters that address the lack of representation of women in museums and in galleries in the US. This is a video called Transforum that follows the life of 3 Black trans women in Miami. It was created and produced by the Miami-based artist Octavia Yearwood. So let me stop and share. I'll just say that I hope all of you that are joining us from far away, that if you're ever in Miami, that you can come and visit us at the Frost Art Museum. And thank you again to my colleagues at FIU for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galpin. I want to give a quick moment for Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta to give us some final remarks on the evening, and then we can wrap everything up. But thank you so much, Dr. Galpin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Galpin. It was amazing virtual tour, and thank you, Dr. Fraser, for thinking about this virtual tour when we were planning the outline of the conference. And that's what Dr. Fraser said. It's very, very good and participants will enjoy it. I take this moment to welcome my dear friend, Dr. Susan Morgan, who has joined from US. Dr. Susan Morgan is part of World Parliament of Religions. She is the president of Sacred Space International. And the best thing is Dr. Susan Morgan works on the architecture of faith. So we had a session where we talked about how to understand spirituality through art and music. And Susan works on sacred space architecture. And we have known for each other for many years. So I'm thankful that Susan Morgan could join. She was too busy, so she could not take out time to be a speaker, which I would have loved, but I'm very thankful, Susan, that you have joined the first day of the conference. With these few words, let's meet tomorrow and look forward for the deliberations tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Carballo. Thank you. Yes, Jacob, yes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. It was a great time.
Good night, Dr. C.
Take care.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, you guys did great.
Bye. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful night or morning. Any final notes or remarks for tomorrow, Dr. Sengupta?
Great. I think it was pretty well done. Yeah. It was,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
You have a good night. We meet tomorrow again.
Awesome. You too. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.